Today we are ranking metalcore albums from 2001, starting with From Autumn to Ashes with Too Bad You're Beautiful. Now, I'd call this a defining album of my high school years that perfectly taps into the angst of that period of development. Crazy opener with the Royal Crown versus Blue Duchess, between the intensity of the riffs and the dual vocals. Then there's the highly dynamic and constantly shifting Cherry Kiss, the roaring intro of Cape Side Rock, and infectious hooks of Eulogy for an Angel, and then one of the best album closers of all time, in my opinion, in Short Stories with Tragic Endings, which I actually used in full for a short film final project for my high school film studies class. I'm putting this one at perfection. I still have that on a VHS tape somewhere in the crawl space. But moving on, we have Dead Blue Sky with Symptoms of an Unwanted Emotion. The lone album from this Ohio crew that really rides the line with 90s melodeath as well as the more synth-heavy black metal acts. And despite those being among my favorite subgenres, the execution here doesn't really do justice to any of those things, in my opinion. Very muddled mix and production, some sloppy, lackluster performances, and aside from the cool synth atmosphere, nothing really grips me on the songwriting front. Wish they had continued on to refine this sound though, as it is a cool fusion. Some people may enjoy this a lot more than me. I just put it at okay. But then we have Darkest Hour with So Sedated, So Secure. Just a year after a debut, I listed at perfection in the previous list, and while I don't like this one as much as that one or some of the other best albums in their discography, you cannot deny these riffs. It starts off relatively strong with an epitaph and the title track, and The Hollow is one of my all-time favorites from them. The hooks per minute ratio here is just a crazy value prospect, especially at kind of how short this album is. I'm putting it at fantastic. Then we have Evergreen Terrace with Losing All Hope is Freedom. The debut album from this Florida band, yes, named for the Simpson Street, and the title is a line from Fight Club. We also open on another obligatory The Matrix sample.
Which was the style at the time.
Some solid tracks here like Failure of a Friend and Manifestation of Anger, and another great performance on the kit. I looked it up and apparently Christopher Brown is now an accomplished jazz drummer right here in Portland, Oregon. Small world. But this was a band I never got into back then, and re-listening to it now still, it just doesn't quite hold up to the competition here, but I enjoyed it. I'm going to put it at good tier. I don't think there are any, terrible albums on this list. But moving on, we have the Red Chord with Fused Together in Revolving Doors. The debut from this awesome Massachusetts band that would also become foundational to the deathcore scene, and you can already hear plenty of that in the vocals, breakdowns, and guitar work, but I'd still argue that this has enough connective tissue and commonality with the other mathcore stuff here to warrant inclusion on this list. Not their most impressive album overall, but already going strong right from the start and blowing out a lot of the competition here, both in terms of performance and songwriting. I could see fantastic or amazing. I think I'm going to put it at amazing right now. Then we have Throwdown with Don't Have to Be Blood to Be Family. Throwdown was another band that, despite being a relatively big name in my circles, I really never got into for no good reason. This is the Orange County band's sophomore album, and true to that scene, they lean pretty heavily on the hardcore influences. Just a very no-frills, well-executed illustration of this era of metalcore. This is also their highest scored on Rate Your Music. I'm going to put it at great tier. We also have Saved by Grace with For What You Have Done. One-off album out of Kansas here. I actually was asking not that long ago for suggestions of bands that sound a lot like Hopesfall, and this is definitely one of them to a T. In fact, one of the guitarists, Dustin Nadler, went on to join Hopesfall in 2003. Same dreamy, drifty riffs that would become even more popular with the Satellite years in 2002, contrasted by the raw passion of the screams, as well as some very Poison the Well sounding moments of spoken word. Rock solid gem here that I was not previously aware of. I'm putting it at amazing. And speaking of Hopesfall, honorable mention to the No Wings to Speak Of EP. It's one of my favorites from them, but I'm not including EPs because that just opens up a whole other can of worms. But moving on, we have Seven Angels, Seven Plagues with Jhazmynes' Lullabye. Another one-and-done album band, this one from Wisconsin, and with several members who would go on to form Misery Signals the following year, hearing similarities to the likes of Norma and Symphony in Peril. Heavy emphasis on panic chords, pingy snare, but alternated perfectly with some more sparkly, kind of Hopesfall-esque melodic parts. Love the gang vocals at the end of Arcadia, Fades as well. I had a lot of people talking about this in the lead-up to this particular list, and I can see why. It is going to perfection. We also have Playing Enemy with Cesarean. The first of just 2 albums from this Seattle band with members of Kiss It Goodbye, Undertow, and Rorschach. The sound is fairly similar to Dead Guy overall, with a dissonant mix of math, hardcore, and noise. A bit of botch in there as well. Really carrying the torch for that indescribable but unmistakable atmosphere of the 90s that I miss so much, and I love the guitar sound as well. I am putting this one at fantastic. We also have Martyr AD with The Human Condition in 12 Fractions. The first full release from this band, formed from members of the previously praised Disembodied after a demo in 2000, coming in fast, hard, and aggressive with those panic chords right from Broken Mouth. The monotonous vocals unfortunately drag things down a bit for me, but the songwriting and instrumental performances keep it from losing steam at any point, really. Also, I think I know what they were going for with Prozac Anecdote, but that track kind of sucks. Overall, I'm putting this one at good tier. We also have All Else Failed with Archetype.
I've reached the end.
The second album from this Pennsylvania band that I assume is named after the Zao album, but that could just be a coincidence. I'm not exactly sure. I saw some decently high ratings for this one, but I wasn't personally in love with it. The vocals are inconsistent in quality, ferocious at times and annoying others, and the songs kind of lacked a hook for me, but the riffs are solid and the drumming very punchy. I'm going to put it at great tier. We also have Blood Has Been Shed with Novella of Uriel. Album 2 for Howard Jones' pre-Killswitch Days band, and a big step up from the debut in my opinion. Louder, tighter, more aggressive. The clean vocal moments are still a shadow of Howard in his prime, but they aren't emphasized anyways. Just total insanity. That bass on Intervention is wild, and then there's that pseudo Raining Blood riff on Signs and Omens. I'm putting this one at fantastic. We also have Arma Angelus with Where Sleepless is Rest from Nightmares. Now, another single album band here out of my own Chicago, Illinois, but this one is especially notable for including Fall Out Boy guitarist Pete Wentz on vocals and Rise Against frontman Tim McIlrath, who does not play on this album, but I look forward to hopefully talking about his vocal work with The Killing Tree next year. Oh, and I looked into it more, and after this album, Patrick Stump became the drummer and Joe Troman became lead guitarist, so we could have had a bizarre timeline where instead of getting rich off of Fall Out Boy, they could still be a struggling metalcore band, which kind of tracks considering that I feel like them and Imagine Dragons are sort of the foundations of what we now know as Octane Core. I'm really talking about this because it's far more interesting than the music ever gets. As much as I loathe Fall Out Boy, they made the right move. Pete does not sound very good on this, and the music is pretty bland. I just put this one at okay. But maybe you love it, so again, put your own rankings down in the comments. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Also, hit the like button if you're enjoying the video so far. But moving on, we have Love is Red. All That's Ahead points to Forever. First of just 2 albums from this Alabama band. It's a solid kind of bog standard melodic metalcore outing. One of those albums where I'm like, yeah, this is good, but I'd rather be listening to like Opposite of December or something that's a little bit better. It drags and the production gets a little grating. It's just like a constant barrage on my ears, the way that they did the mix. I'm going to put it at good. Then we have Zao with Self-Titled. Fan and personal favorite of this series, back for their 6th album already after a string of top-notch records that all made the upper tiers of the previous lists. The band was not on great terms at this point though, with Corey Darst taking up much of the vocals at this point on tour, although this is still Dan on the recording, and they even infamously broke up on stage during this time.
This is pretty much like the last freaking bit. I don't think there's going to be a band much longer, man. So, thank you.
But despite the tension and Russ's absence, there is some really cool stuff here. It opens on a particularly aggressive note and then gets slower and more experimental with electronic drums and interesting use of acoustic and piano. I heard they also did some percussion with like bottles. Some pretty touching, clean vocals too. I wouldn't say it's one of their best and yet still a unique and satisfying listen in its own right. I'm going to put it at amazing. And we have God Forbid with Determination. The second album from this Jersey band, and coming in strong with those wailing harmonized guitars, even showing up Avenged Sevenfold, I would say. We will get to that. And then getting 10 times as aggressive with better production too. Really killer guitar work of both the heavy and melodic variety with strong dynamics to the songwriting and great pacing. Some insane bass work here too, like on Wicked. This one jumped all the way up to perfection. Like, I was kind of blown away by it. I have listened to God Forbid over the years, but for whatever reason, I never got around to this record until now, and I'm glad that this gave me an excuse to do that. Moving on, we have Bleeding Through with Dust to Ashes. Another case of a band I love, but with a debut that is pretty rough, bordering on demo quality. I think the opener is the perfect encapsulation, as it's an earlier version of Turns Cold to the Touch, and I just feel like the version on the next album is superior in every way. Brandon's clean vocals are pretty weak, and the mix is all over the place, but I will say that the guitar work and drumming is already pretty on point. The bloodlust is there, and the Fight Club sample is a nice little touch. I'm going to put it at great tier. And we have 18 Visions with the best of 18 Visions. Their top-rated album on Rate Your Music, so I guess this actually did end up living up to its title. They picked what they felt was their best out-of-print material and re-recorded it, as well as opening with a brand new track, and unfortunately the one that gave Motionless in White its name.
What have you done?
And once more, Bleeding Through vocalist Brandon Shipati also plays guitar and provides backing vocals. Another very grimy-sounding album production-wise. I do think that it's a better album than Until the Ink Runs Out, and I enjoy the mathy chaos of the performances. I'm putting it at amazing. Then we have Caliban with Vent. The second album from this German band, and it kicks off at a high tier, bringing a sound that's sort of mixed between Bleeding Through and Zao, with a bit more of that European melodeath sound to the guitars. Strong production, too. But at 54 minutes, this thing really drags in places, and as much as I usually love female clean vocals in my metalcore, the ones here just aren't great and tend to just stop songs in their tracks. It's a very inconsistent listen and kind of frustrating as a result. There are times where I'm listening and I'm like, man, this belongs at fantastic. And then there are other times where I'm like, this is trash. So it ended up at good overall. Then we have As I Lay Dying with Beneath the Encasing of Ashes. Big band hitting the charts here, but with an album that not as many people talk about in comparison to their breakout album, which was the next one. But you can already hear a lot of their sound developing just in a more unprocessed and unfocused form. In that way, this is another one that feels kind of like a demo, and much like Killswitch Engage's self-titled debut, there are early versions of some of the songs that will show up on the next one. In that way, this is another one that feels kind of like a demo, and in fact, much like Killswitch Engage's self-titled and that Bleeding Through album, there are early versions of some of the songs that will show up on that next one. As far as their discography goes, it's not one of their best, but it's a solid start and makes for another interesting entry for the year. It's got a nice groove to it a lot of the time, too. I'm putting it at great tier. We have Luti-Kriss with Throwing Myself. This is actually Norma Jean by their original name, and lots of similarities here to Bless the Martyr, which, again, it is up to you if we get to that in a future video, but also kind of some Zao sounds with the often slower, more atmospheric focus of tracks like Blacksmith and Patiently Philadelphia, which makes sense because Jesse Smith is actually listed in the production notes. Some real bangers on here, and I love the groove on Light Blue Collar. I'm putting this one at fantastic. And we have Every Time I Die with Last Night in Town. The debut album from another one of my all-time favorite bands in the genre. I know I rank it somewhat lower in their discography, but that's just because, like the Dillinger Escape Plan, they have so many great records. I won't be surprised if pretty much every one of their albums, if we continue this series, ends up at the top tier. Definitely one of their heaviest, fastest, and grittiest. What it lacks in some of the more overt quirkiness that started to develop more on Hot Damn, it makes up for in sheer blunt force impact. Killer 32 minutes of Southern Fried Buffalo, New York mathcore energy front to back with killer riffs and Keith giving it his all on vocals. Rip again to this band and also my buddy Dan from Leave. This was his favorite album of theirs. I am putting it at perfection. Then we have Taken with And They Slept. The only full-length album from this California band that leans more into post-hardcore. Love the riff that opens up the album and twinkly, mathy guitars in general. Unfortunately, another case where the clean vocals aren't great, and similar to Bleeding Through, the mix on the drums is pretty bad unless that was just the version that I was listening to. Speaking of which, Chad Tafola also played guitar on that Bleeding Through album. Another shame because I feel like with a little more polish this could be really cool, but I just put it at good tier. Then we have Nora with Loser's Intuition.
Watch your left go!
The debut full-length from this New Jersey band that I feel gets weirdly forgotten in discussions these days, but I remember seeing on a lot of Trustkill release CD insert ads back in the day. Lots of similarities to Every Time I Die, but with their own twist on it. The production on this album is actually better, I would say, which makes sense considering that lead singer Carl Severson owned Ferret Records back in the day, although this came out on Trustkill, whose owner he went to high school with. He also co-founded Good Fight Records, which puts out tons of great music right now in this genre. Check out the track Nobody Takes Pictures of the Drummer. I am putting this one at fantastic. I almost put it at perfection. Like, I really enjoy this album. Then we have Candiria with 300% Density. This is actually the fourth album from this Forerunner Brooklyn band that we have not yet covered, but whose scope goes well beyond the genre. You could argue if they even truly belong here. But there's plenty of that like early mathcore sound on here, but it's also influenced by jazz, progressive, and then just straight rap and hip-hop moments that are thankfully far removed from its use on the more like octane-core landscape of today. It's not that SoundCloud rapper bullshit.
Hey yo, check the vertical damages, we wrap you up advantages for real. My heart is made of flesh, my tongue is steel.
Very grounded 90s stuff with some awesome beats. Reminds me of stuff like Cannibal Ox. Very multi-textured listen that makes for an entirely unique experience on this list, even if it's not one of my favorites overall. I'm putting this at amazing, right alongside like Zayo. Then we have Unearth with The Stings of Conscience. The debut from this Boston band through Eulogy Recordings and produced by Adam D. Pretty raw and at times a bit clunky, but definitely with its stronger points, especially in comparison to some of the weaker debuts here. There are some riffs on here like the opening one that goes super hard, but then also on ones like that same opening track and Stronghold that remind me of Dark Tranquillity's The Gallery. All of course mixed with a more 90s hardcore flavor. Only the People is a big standout with songwriting and riffs that feel like a foreshadowing of what the next album would sound like. More absolutely killer drumming too. I really enjoy this album. It is going to fantastic. Then we have Avenged Sevenfold with Sounding the Seventh Trumpet. Not one of the stronger debuts on this list from this powerhouse band, if you ask me, but to be fair, I've never been the biggest fan of this band to begin with.
How dare you!
There's plenty to praise, but the performances haven't found their footing yet, with the vocals especially rough and at times just plain off-key. The riffing, which has always been my main draw with this band, is also just not as strong with this particular lineup, but the drumming is already the standout right out of the gate from the Rev, which is even more impressive knowing that his parts were all apparently recorded in one take. Some solid songs like We Come Out at Night still beats out many here. I'm going to put it at great tier. Also, honorable mention to Integrity with Closure, the Cleveland band's sixth album following up the much derided Integrity 2000, and unfortunately this isn't much better. It's not really metalcore, everything but that really noise rock, punk, post-punk, weird acoustic, whispery stuff. None of it particularly good either, but it's sort of so weird and bad that it's fascinating. Also, shout out to Will Haven with Carpe Diem, which I considered making a case for and is a killer album in its own right, but is ultimately more noise and sludge. But we're going to close things out, of course, with Converge with Jane Doe. already years into helping to write the metalcore playbook at this point, but this album in particular is basically like the Reign and Blood of the genre. In a discography filled with 9s and higher, this just happens to be the most important 10, absolute rager of a record that really captures what it feels like to be in the genuine unbridled emotions of a relationship catastrophically imploding. And with some Kurt Ballard riffs that still get stuck in my head regularly, with the likes of Concubine, Distance and Meaning, and Fault and Fracture, to name just a few. What a monument of an album it is, of course, going to perfection. Y'all check out this playlist to see my rankings of both the 90s and also the year 2000. Hopefully we'll continue on if these continue to do well. And check out this video for your personal YouTube recommendation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.